Right. It is the week of Thanksgiving, and we're meeting on Tuesday rather than Thursday. So I really appreciate Jacob you being here. And what I wanted to do tonight, we don't have any more weekly reflections about material in the class, but we are going to have 2 more weeks of attendance. And in tonight's class, and then next week's class, I wanted to go over some of what people have submitted. We're going to have class again on Thursday, so hopefully more people will show up. And I wanted to remind people too that it is really important to watch the weekly videos because there we go. I wonder why that was clicked off. But because I do answer a lot of questions on the weekly videos, and I noticed that some people are emailing concerned about different things. And my job is not to make sure that people fail. My job is to do everything I can to help you be successful as a student. What can be really difficult, especially if you are a non-traditional student or have a job or live in the essentially if you live in the real world, which everybody does, all of us do. When you're taking an online class, I think I need to have a certain amount of flexibility because otherwise you would be in body in the class. You wouldn't need to do the online um, section. So that all being said, a lot of people have been writing me and saying, hey, I need an extension for this because something's come up. And that isn't a problem at all. Just keep me in the loop and let me know what's going on. I do have to have everything to me by the last moment of finals. So that's midnight, Friday the 13th. And I'm hoping that everything can be done by the end of next week. I have been grading. I am almost done grading, and everything by Thanksgiving should be done. So if anybody wants to redo stuff, like there's been a couple students who have worked really hard redoing stuff to make sure that, for example, it's submitted in the right format, or they have their citations in the right, done correctly, and all that kind of stuff. And I want to get everything graded before Thursday, so you guys have a week and a half to redo everything that needs to be redone. And for people who have fallen behind on weekly reflections, go to weekly reflection number 14, and I believe it's also on number 13. But number 14 gives you specific directions on how to do a video of the projects that people have turned in, as well as a couple of the final capstone projects that people have done. My internet has been a little bit spotty today. So if my voice doesn't match the video monitor, it's not because of the alien conspiracy, or maybe not entirely because of that. It's probably a lot is just due to the fact that my internet is a little bit spotty. So I think I want to remind people that in this class, instead of um, quizzes and written tests, everybody is doing weekly reflections and projects. And those are how we assess how you're doing and how you're taking in the knowledge for the class. Um, I've I wanted to mention there's been a number of times where people didn't understand what the weekly reflection was about, and a couple people didn't seem to be reading my comments as to why they weren't getting really very good grades on them, and it was simply because either they weren't covering material that is directly in the module, directly related to the module, which means if it's, for example, not a piece of art that we talked about directly, it needs to be a piece of art from the same time period we talked about and have its roots but before 1350, which is the cutoff for this class. The second reason that people might not be getting be really happy about the reflections is because it must demonstrate that you are using the 4 tools of artistic critique. Jacob, do you remember what the 4 tools are, what the first one is?
The first one is a scribe.
Yes, excellent. Very good. And that's where you just talk about what the thing looks like, what it feels like, or what colors it has. And the second one is analyze, and that's where you kind of extrapolate how it was put together. This tells us something about the tool use in society that people had where they built the art. What's the third one after analyze?
Interpret.
Yes, very good. And that's where we try to get into the head of the artist and use our own imagination as well, where we try to guess what their worldview might have been like and talk a little bit about how we respond to it. Remember that the dancing girl out of bronze from the Harappans in Western India. I love that because it looks to me like whoever commissioned it had a teenage daughter. I mean, because she is dancing and is full of sass, just like all of my teenage daughters were, all five of them. And it that kind of thing helps us to connect with the art, and through the art, connecting with the artist, which is I think that is the best part about art. Excuse me, when we see things that people left behind, we know that whatever this thing is, it represents something important to them that they wanted to make something that lasted. So we know, whatever that importance was. It may be something having to do with the uh, creation of the universe, like Egyptian tomb paintings, and it could be something where the person is just really sarcastic, like Metamorphosis, which is a Greek novel, or Asclepius's the Frogs, where the whole play is all about a drunken Hercules that goes to rescue somebody from hell, and it was intended as humor. But so art doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be pompous. It can be fun as well. But I think we find out that it's fun when we take the time to use these tools of artistic critique to actually look at it. And then the fourth tool is evaluate. And this is where we decide, is it successful? How successful is it? Do we need to evaluate it with a different set of parameters than what we typically think of as successful? I think with a lot of the art that we look at that's before 1350, because it is commissioned for and on the behalf of generally heads of state, those who aspire to be heads of state, heads of areas, government, and religious centers, it's going to have a very different level or different set of parameters for success than art that we do today. For example, the jewelry that we see from, for example, the Sutton Hoo, or the Viking jewelry that we saw, or those the death paintings that you see in late Egyptian Alexandria, the death paintings that they would put on coffins and other things like that. For the time, it may be very successful. But you try to sell something like that at Target, I think maybe the jewelry would go well, but it would have to be adjusted for people's contemporary tastes. And I think that a lot of people would think that the funerary portraits are interesting until they started realizing where they were coming from. I just found something out today. The ossuary boxes, that's what Egyptians and people around the Mediterranean started doing. Mummies were really popular in Egypt until about the second century AD, but they started waning about a couple hundred years earlier than that and started being replaced with this idea of the ossuary box, which was a decorated box where somebody would be buried for a few years, then their bones would be picked up or dug out, scraped clean, and then put into a box. And one of the things that people were discovering, and I just found this out today, is that for males that were buried in Egypt during this time period, that was the process. You know, there were male mummies, absolutely, but the ossuary boxes, they would bury the male, and then after a few years, dig them up, clean the bones off, and put them in these boxes. For women, though, um, and where this comes into art is because the carving on the boxes and the paintings that were done with egg tempera to celebrate what the person looked like in the prime of their life. But they were finding out that the women's bones, it looked like they decayed before being buried. So there was some sort of decay going on before they were stuck in the ground. And somebody was able to finally find out, and then they published their findings just this last couple of weeks, that a lot of these Greek Egyptian families, if there was a young woman in the home who died, they would keep their body in the house until it decayed naturally and then bury it. You know, so it's above ground. They think that there's a couple reasons for that, but I just think that that's really fascinating that when we find out stuff like that. Anyway, those four tools I think are really important. Now, remember our discussion where we talked about where the meaning of art resides? Where I don't I know we all have our own opinion about that, but do you remember the 3 different perspectives that we learned about watching that video? Like one of the proposals was that the meaning of art only exists within the mind of the artist. And that's the only place it can be valid. And so in order to really truly appreciate art, we have to find out everything the artist thought about the art. Do you remember what one of the other 2 perspectives was? Is the next perspective was that the meaning of the art resides entirely with the viewer, and that the artist doesn't have, once they make the thing, they have no control over what the art means. And I think that, and one of the things that I think is kind of frustrating, I believe it was Clement Greenberg who said during the 50s that if you don't get the art, in the first second you encounter it, it's just not worth it. Don't bother. And I think that's horrible because I don't know. Have you ever had the experience where there's a movie that you really, really liked, or a book that you really, really enjoyed, and or even a place that you visit that you really love, and you go back and watch the movie again a year later, or read the book again 2 years later, or go back to that same camping spot or whatever, you know, the next year, it rarely stays the same. These things that we enjoy, when we go back and revisit them, they somehow become different and more. They change with us. And so I think that idea that you can only get it immediately is really cutting out a lot of what art is for. Excuse me. Even though we don't directly talk to the artists most of the time, it's rare that we have that opportunity. Still, there is something of an imaginary conversation that goes on between us and the artwork, and it should. Even if you encounter something that declares that it's art and you hate it, you owe it to yourself to, if you can stand it, at least look at it from the perspective of, is there anything here that is possible to appreciate? Is there anything that's positive about it? Can I, even though I don't understand this or it looks disgusting to me, can I appreciate that the person feels strongly about what it is that they're doing? Or can I appreciate the fact that the person really takes their construction process seriously? Or can I appreciate that they've really put time into it and thought about it? And if we can open the door to that and then start going through those 4 tools of artistic critique, the artwork begins to grow with our understanding of it. And whether or not we like it, we can appreciate it more. We can respect it more. And that third perspective of where the meaning of the art resides. So the first one was entirely in the mind of the artist. The second was entirely in the mind of the observer. The third perspective is the one that I believe, and I think kind of holds up with what you guys have said in the class, is that somehow the meaning of the art resides in that space that we make where we are working with our imagination about who the artist is to create meaning for the object or the thing or whatever it is that we're viewing at. And sometimes there's almost always surface meaning that we can get right away, and that usually drives our immediate reactions as to whether or not we like something. But as we examine it, divorce our emotions from it and describe it and really look at it, and then start trying to imagine what the artist was doing, how they made it, and then maybe imagine what the artist was saying. As we go through that process, we can open ourselves to potential perspectives on what the thing means, because we're during the process of uniting our own perspective with the evidence of the artist's perspective. And I think that that's really where that resides. Movies, I really appreciate movies like Deadpool because, uh, the element that I appreciate about it is that Deadpool is one of the very few comic book characters that knows he is an entertainment figment. He knows he's somebody else's imagination, and he communicates with the audience. And the humor comes from him knowing what our expectations are, because he knows that he's playing to an audience, and him playing on those comic book tropes in relationship to what we expect him to do, because he knows he's a comic book character. And I love that kind of thing because it's an example of art directly addressing where the true meaning lies, which is, I believe, in that conversation we have between ourselves as viewer and the artist, the creator of whoever it is that made it. And I think that's I. What do you think about that, Jacob? Do you buy that? I'm sorry, what?
Sorry. What was the question again?
Do you buy the idea that the meaning of the art resides in that space where we kind of think about it and hold almost an imaginary conversation with the artist? It
I
resides
feel
in
like
our response to the art. What's that?
I feel like that I feel like that would kind of make sense. I believe that would.
Well, has there ever been something that you've encountered that you really despised when you first saw it, but then a couple of years later you come back to it after you've thought about it and you realize, that isn't so bad. In fact, I almost kind of like it. Have you ever had that
Yeah.
kind of experience? I'll tell
Yeah.
you,
Yeah, I remember.
I've had that experience with green olives stuffed with garlic. I mean, when I first tried that, I wanted to throw up so hard my spine itched. It just. But with subsequent Thanksgivings, now I look forward to them. It's a distinct flavor, but it's something I trained myself to be accustomed to, and now I kind of enjoy it. And I'm not saying all art that you want to throw up at the first time you encounter is worth that kind of process, but I think a lot it's something that we can think about and consider with most situations that we're in. I remember watching a debate where it was both Stephen Fry. If you guys know who Stephen Fry is, he played Mycroft Holmes in the second Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movie. He's a comedian that is one of the most powerful thinkers in the last 70 years, easily. And Jordan Peterson, he's a very conservative psychologist. And Jordan Peterson talks a lot about one of the most powerful things that we can do as human beings is to demonstrate compassion. So both of these, so he's very conservative. Stephen Fry is very liberal, and they were on one side, going up against two very liberal people. But they were both Jordan Peterson and Stephen Fry were on the same team of debate, where they were talking about the ridiculousness of political labeling or politically appropriate labeling, where we give people different titles and then uh, position ourselves to be offended on their behalf when some thoughtless, no thinking person uh, breaks the acceptable parameters of those labels. And this is another term for this is some people have used the term woke culture to talk about this, where folks just go out of the way to be as inoffensive as possible, and others go out of their way to be as offended as possible because they don't understand that all of us are trying the best that we can. And one of the points and it surprised a lot of people, that Stephen Fry, who is a very loud liberal, was on the same side of the debate as Jordan Peterson, who is a very loud conservative. And Stephen Fry said, when we communicate as human beings, we have to take the risk of being offended and offending. We have to accept that risk, and we have to be open to forgiving immediately, because we know that pain is part of the process of growing. And I really like that perspective, because he says, you don't have to like it uh, in order to appreciate it. And whether or not you like it, you shouldn't be reacting to it as your first go-to reaction from a place of being offended or hurt. When you have extended family members, or you have meet somebody for the first time, a lot of the times we don't understand each other. We're not at a place where we're completely comfortable with each other. And there are times where we can easily offend each other. I've known people who hadn't spoken to other family members for years because there was something that happened that they created a context for, which meant that the other person was going out of their way to be offensive. And it wasn't. It was just a misunderstanding. But as we encounter art and other people, we have to be willing, I think, to engage in the idea that it's okay to accept the fact that you're a little bit hurt or a little bit offended. Don't put that on the other person as being going out of their way to purposely damage you, but just put that into the space where you understand maybe you don't appreciate everything that's going on. You don't get the full context. I know all of us have had the experience where we overhear somebody swearing, and it would be easy to say, oh, that person is completely uncouth. And then you turn the corner and you find out that the person just stabbed themselves while they were cutting carrots or something. They were swearing because they got hurt, not because they have a foul mouth. And when we understand context, when we appreciate other people's perspectives, and this also applies incredibly readily to art, then I think we can open ourselves up to, at the very least, a burgeoning respect, and then a greater understanding and appreciation, and then finally we might even enjoy it. There's plenty of opportunities to do that. I hope that everybody remembers when we were talking about, looking at some of this artwork that we saw. You looked at a medieval era artwork that the Enlightenment labeled as the Dark Ages. And a lot of people said, well, the folks there then didn't have any idea how to do perspective. Well, that isn't true. And I think that the thing that demonstrates that isn't true is because they built buildings. If you have no concept of perspective, you're not going to be able to create any sort of set of plans for anybody to build anything, whether you're scratching it in the dirt or you've drawn it out. But I think since we can assume that most people that do things on purpose, and I think that is a pretty fair assumption that we can make, then when people are creating objects or paintings or mosaics where the architecture doesn't have to be realistic and it's not being showed as realistic, then that means that they are showing a space that is supposed to represent an arbitrary architectural space. Like when we saw that painting of St. Francis meeting with Sultan Malik al-Kamil, a lot of those paintings have this really odd looking porch with a wall and some really weird looking buildings. It's not because they had no idea what they were drawing. but the artist generally was drawing or painting this back in Europe, and they had no idea of the specific space St. Francis was in. They knew that the importance resided in the fact of the meeting. And so then, their quote unquote ignorance for architecture is actually a symbol that this was a sheltered space that these two men were able to talk within. And I think it helps us to put things in a completely different context. If we assume that our ancestors were as smart as we are or smarter, and we assume that what they did was done on purpose, that really changes a lot of assumptions that we have made historically about their capacity and what they did. Is that a pretty fair assessment? Well, we have about, we have some time, and I wanted to share a couple weekly reflections that were done as videos. I know that many people do not have all 14 of their weekly reflections done, and I want you guys to, everybody that watches this video, last week's video and the video before that, know that it is perfectly appropriate to make a video file to submit where you apply the 4 tools of artistic critique that Jacob and I were just talking about into a format where you can show the image of the art on the screen and then just do a voiceover where you go through each of those 4 steps. And again, they are describe, analyze, interpret, and evaluate are the 4 steps. So let's watch this one, and then let's talk about what you think about it. My computer is being a little bit slow. Please forgive me. There we go. Okay, Jacob, can you see this? It says Jizo Basatsu.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and watch this.
Photo shows a bronze Jizo statue, which is a man standing on a platform.
Sorry about that.
This week we learned about Japanese art from Jomin to Muromachi, and I chose to reflect on the Jizo statue from the 12th to 13th century. This photo shows a bronze Jizo statue, which is a man standing on a platform. And to me, the platform looks like an open lotus flower. The man is wearing a draping robe and holding a staff in one hand and a rounded object in the other, which is thought to be like a jewel. He has a calm and cool expression on his face, almost like a meditative state. The piece looks like it's made of bronze, most likely, and the way that the light hits this in the photo gives it some depth with the shadows and color black. The statue is likely made in the bronze casting technique or something similar. The splotches of dark and gold give it kind of a rough appeal. And the use of natural light not only emphasizes the calm vibe that comes with the statue, but can also be seen in the man's peaceful facial expression. The use of natural and just a couple colors of black and gold tones also adds to a calm peacefulness vibe. The image makes me feel super at peace and meditative. Jizo is a symbol of compassion and protection. And typically in Buddhism, like I remember from our modules, the Bodhisattvas would be prayed to in both temple worship and people's homes. We can see that protection specifically with the staff in the hand. And the shining of the platform brings a sense of power to the man which stands up upon it. And I imagine it brings comfort to those who see and hold it. The photo successfully gives a spiritual atmosphere, and the lighting enhances the calm mood. The emotional effect is very strong, making the viewer feel calm, protected, and hopeful. And the Jizo could be even more tranquil, in my opinion, if it was in some sort of like greenery and nature, and then like light calming colors, maybe lavender or light blue could add more beauty and uniqueness to the Jizo, and possibly enhancing the jewel could bring more significance to the protector aspect of this piece. But overall, it is really neat, and I definitely feel like meditative and peaceful when looking at it.
Okay, one thing I really appreciate about this is Carietta was able to. It looked to me like she went through each of those 4 steps one after another. I mean, I could see that she didn't announce that she was going from step to step, but it's pretty apparent when she shifted from describing to analyzing, talking, and then when she went from analyzing to interpreting, starting to talk about what it could possibly mean, and then at the end when she was evaluating. One thing I really did appreciate is at the very beginning, she pointed out the time period of it, which underscored the fact that this fits very clearly within the time period of our class. So, what did you think about what she did?
I thought it was very interesting. I liked it in general. I honestly can agree with what she said when she was evaluating it, that it kind of brought some meditational value. It's just very, it's like something that I would agree with a lot.
Uh, could you see or could you tell when she went through each of the 4 steps?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. And she also demonstrated that if you know what you're talking about, it sounded to me like she had points to talk about in front of her because she didn't do any stumbling or anything like that. And what impressed me is that she did exactly what I had asked her to do. And if you looked at the bottom of that image, she had her source right in the image as well. Again, done exactly MLA style with the accessed on date at the end of it. And I thought it wouldn't have mattered almost what object she was looking at because I think she did a really good job at talking about. Excuse me. Now I want to talk about another one, and we'll go. I want to go through this one as well, just to give people ideas. Um, Sorry, I'm hitting buttons almost at random. I'm sure that it is. It almost feels at random, but okay, here we go. All right, this is by the same individual, and I want to just see how she does on this one. Oh, okay. Hold on a sec. I'm sorry. I was wondering why the sound wasn't active, but it was because I hadn't unmuted it. Here we go. Sorry about that.
For my weekly reflection, I am going to talk about the Rusala Madonna, which is an altarpiece with the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus, surrounded by angels or saints. This is the largest 19th century painting panel done by Lucio. The background is gold, while the images are bright and colorful with like reds and blues and maybe even purples, creating some contrast and really concentrating on the figures in this painting. The painting style is tempera, and it's applied to wood, and it's from early Italian Renaissance with some Byzantine influence, which is seen with the gold and the figures depicted. The saints with halos are representing holiness. This piece centers Mary and Jesus, focusing on their importance, and the outlining of the figures align with the early Christian and Byzantine style. The gold background highlights divinity of this overall piece, and the rich colors of reds, blues, golds, purple, even green in there, of the clothing indicate maybe some wealth or godliness. Mary and Jesus are the primary symbols in Christianity, representing purity, life, maybe even protection, and spiritual influence. And the angels surrounding kind of remind me of heaven and just a belief in the afterlife or eternalness. Mary's face and the holding of Jesus creates a feeling of like calmness and motherly or unconditional love. And this piece, was originally in a chapel, which was meant to be worshipped upon, which inspired faith and Christianity. And it's just a beautiful example of religious art, specifically in the early Renaissance period. The colors and overall meaning behind this piece are really effective at conveying that spirituality and faith message. I really enjoyed the contrast specifically with this piece, as it brings a super appealing presence. And the gold brings out a sense of richness and importance, while the natural figures bring kind of like an emotional aspect and inspiration. And as I mentioned before, this incredible painting emphasizes the significance of Christianity, devotion throughout history, specifically the early Renaissance.
All right. What did you think about that one?
I thought what she said about when she was describing it was very much what's the word? I honestly agree with what she said when she was just describing about the piece. However, I did hear a couple of times when she was at first kind of just saying, having those moments where she's like pausing moments, and then all the way at the end, she, like in the middle to the end, she was very much able to like flawlessly go through it.
Yeah, and I felt thank you. I felt that she did a pretty good job going through those steps again. I mean, it wasn't as clear cut as the other one was, going from one step to another, but she's talking about the tempera, the application of the tempera, and then where it was and what that could do to contribute to its meaning, how people might use it. And I thought she did a pretty good job with the interpretation aspect, talking about it. And then it seemed to me that her conclusion about her evaluation was that if the function of this is to make you feel calm and meditative, then it is successful. And I kind of like that. Would you agree with that?
I would 100% agree with it.
Yeah, I think she did a pretty good job on that. Okay, now I would like to look at. I wanted to look at some more different projects, research projects. But if it's okay with you, Jacob, I want to just pull up. You have several that you've turned in. I just want to pull it up and just have you talk about what you did in the project, if that's okay. And this will be, I want to talk about, before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about what the projects represent and what people are doing with them. And so the project we're going to look at is Viking houses that you did. Some of the things that are really important with the projects are, again, they have to fit within the parameters of the class. And I have every single person who has emailed me, I have responded to regarding their final capstone project proposal. And a couple people haven't sent me our email chain. They just did a proposal. And you need to be able to show me that we communicated. And a couple people there, for whatever reason, were not able to get to me. Like Kellen was not able to get a hold of me through email. And so he actually texted me. So look on the syllabus. If that's you, look on the syllabus and you can text me. And he and I were able to talk over the phone. And for him to get credit for the proposal, all he did was submit and say, hey, you and I spoke on the phone on this date at 3:30 in the afternoon, and I described what I wanted to do with you, and you said, yeah, that'd be great. So and that's great because it's documentation that we had a conversation, and that's what the proposal represents. Excuse me. You can tell that I'm having some really bad allergies right now as I make all sorts of honking noises. Some of if you turn something in and you didn't get credit for it, or there's any issues and you think that I didn't correctly grade it, please let me know. Either text me or email me. And am checking my email through Canvas as well as the university. And I am convinced that there is something going on with my internet, because I will go through all the email. I won't see anything for 3 or 4 days. Then I'll open it up again. And all of a sudden I find out that I missed emails from 3 days before, even though I've been checking. So if I'm not responding to you, email me or text me rather on my cell phone number and say, hey, this is so-and-so from your 2710 class. I've tried emailing and it just isn't going through, and I need to talk to you about my project. So we need to get all that taken care of this week, if at all possible. Since family's coming over, what that means is I desperately want to get out of doing chores. So I will be responding as quickly as I can every time I see emails or texts from any of you guys, because it gives me an excuse to not have to clean up. And there have been a couple of people who have already finished their final capstone project. You will notice that the due dates for these projects are the 8th of December. And I've told several people that the final drop dead deadline that everything has to be submitted by is the last day of finals. Everything has to be submitted by Friday the 13th. If that is not going to work for you, you need to contact me as quickly as possible, and we'll see what we can do to help you so you can get the stuff done. I have to turn grades in so that things like FAFSA and scholarships are taken care of. And so that's why we have to have that deadline there. Again, I will be finishing grading in the next couple of days, get all caught up. And if there's anything that you need to turn in or to reevaluate, reassess, and resubmit, please do that right away. The types of things that I've noticed people have done is I mentioned not staying within the scope of the class. And the scope of this class is prehistory to 1350. Second is not putting it in a format that connects it to the class. So one of the things you must do with your projects is introduce it by saying, hey, this ties into our class because, this is what I'm doing and it ties into our class because of these things. Like somebody did a project on Blue-Eyed Samurai, and they were talking about, because, we talked about this in class and how it's based on early Muromachi period history. So even though it's a contemporary animation, it still has its roots in pre-1350 Japanese history. And so, stuff like that is great. And then the project also has to demonstrate, it has to also follow the parameters that we talked, that are described in the assignment descriptions. Which means if you're doing a research paper, you have to include 8 images, if it's for one of the regular projects. If you're doing a PowerPoint, it needs to be submitted in a video file. One student from another class, she tried 4 times, and finally we were able to get things, or she was able to figure out how to get her computer to talk to mine correctly. And so, and that, yeah, it was a pain in the neck, but she got it done, and she was able to do it. And there's been some really creative solutions as well, which is great. And then also, it is really important to make sure that you pay attention to MLA standards when you do your citations. That means everything is formatted in MLA format for each individual citation. Each citation that you accessed online has an accessed on date at the end of it. And if you accessed it in one of those ancient of things, a real life library like we have on campus, and I've dinged you a couple points for not saying accessed on, just write a note and say, hey, these things I actually found in our library, so I didn't have to use the internet at all. Then I can give you the points. And then the last is on that, so alphabetical MLA format, and then the last is making sure that you have the accessed on date phrase at the end, just like I have in the examples. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. But if it's okay, Jacob, I want to, let's see, and we may only have time to look at one of these, and that's totally fine. This is from our this is from the discussion, and I think that this is the 5th project. So let's see. So this looks like it's a research paper. No, it's not a research paper. It is an annotated bibliography.
Should have said, yeah. That should.
So explain this, the introduction to me.
So when I went with it, I wanted to discuss about discuss about 5 different Viking structures, like how they were able, how like early Vikings were using them, like utilizing them, uh, life-wise. And
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to see what was kind of like
Right.
how they were used.
So one thing that I'm noticing is that this is something that some people have had a difficult time with. You've done a really good job where you've written 2 paragraphs for each of these citations. And then each of these articles talk about a different, like this is pit houses. And this one is fortress. And then a longhouse. I really like that. That's very intentional research. So what did you learn as you were doing this?
Well, I learned one thing I did learn about was how they made these type of houses. Like there was one, it's probably like I think it was the poultry house. They would make it one like half a meter below the ground, so it'd just be like under just a little bit, and people would be able to use it. Or wait, no, I think it wasn't the poultry house. It was which one was it?
Okay, there's a boathouse, a temple, a farmhouse, a
It was the
fortress,
farm. Yeah, it
the
was the
farmhouse.
farmhouse one. Yeah. They'd make it like one like half a meter underneath to where it was just protected from the elements. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And same goes with or not the same, but like the fortresses, they would make it in a circular fashion. And I saw some of the pictures, and it was quite a interesting sight to see.
That is very cool. No, I love this. I think it's really well done. So that's excellent, and that's just an example of a project. And I love your take on it because yeah, architecture counts in our history class. You know, we talk about the buildings that people live in and design. That's part of the history of art. And one thing that I really like about this or appreciate about this is you not only are you talking about the architecture, but you're focusing on what the differences are. You know, and comparing that to the use, and which I think is really interesting, because most of the time we have a tendency to look at the geometry of something or the color of the stone that's used. Like when we were talking about the Gothic churches, you were talking about the different shapes on the outside and the rose window and stuff like that. So I think you did a great job on that. That's wonderful. And I had something else queued up that is not cooperating. Okay. And I was going to have you talk about another project, but I'm just going to have you talk about the capstone, if that's okay with you. I just have to pull it up here. Because this is something that we had talked about you wanting to do. And I think it's really an interesting approach. And this is something that I wish we had like a time-lapse video of you actually doing it on your computer. But could you describe your rationale behind this and what you were trying to accomplish?
Well, from when I think it was the previous discovery project, um, I made a Mayan temple in the same fashion, but I wanted to do it. Well, or actually, no, my friend suggested me doing this, and I thought it was a good idea, so I put it up as a proposal, and just it was honestly, it was interesting, and it was a very fun uh, thing to do. And as for like the time lapse, I was wanting to do it, but I just wasn't able to fully get it to work. So I had to resort to using 5 images and talking about it.
So, what exactly does this demonstrate? What were you doing with the Cologne Cathedral?
I was wanting to do like a recreation, try and build it, make it kind of look like the one that is in Cologne uh, in real life.
What program did you use?
For the how to build it, I used the game Minecraft to build the entire thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. That's why it's so interesting to me that this is Cologne Cathedral built in 1248, and you did this whole thing in Minecraft, which is why it looks the way it does. What kinds of research did you do? Because you have the two things right here. What kinds of did you were you looking for what architects worked on about it, or were you just looking at the way it looked, or what kinds of research did you do?
I had a couple of research, or a couple of things that I was able to research. One being just how the building looked exactly, and how like the layout, like the found like blueprints were back then. Because it was kind of a interesting way on doing it. It was it looked very simple, yet it was also very largely complex. Because if you look in the picture, I know it doesn't look good, but it's like a 5 by 5 for all those small squares, and then there's I think it was a 9 or a 5 by 9 for the middle
Oh,
portion.
right here. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah. So this one is 9 by 9.
Yeah, that one's a 9 by 9. So I just followed along with the layout, the floor plan for the cathedral itself. And then I
That
got
is
in.
cool. Go
What was
ahead.
that? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
And yeah, then I went ahead and tried, or not try, I went ahead and started like making a skeletal structure of the cathedral itself, trying to get everything to look almost exact. Trying to get all the spires. I got all the buttresses in there, which you can see they're all lined up.
Right.
Even. Um, and it's not 1-to-1, of course, because if I were to do it 1-to-1, it would have taken more than 10 hours. It probably would have taken 3 days because in this game, one block is a meter on all like X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And since the cathedral is 157 meters, it would have, or yeah, 157 meters, it would have taken ages to finish.
Yeah, a lot of rendering time.
Yeah.
And I think it's really fantastic how you do this kind of distorted drone perspective on it. I think that that's really interesting. So, as you did this project, what kinds of things did you learn and appreciate from the original construction of the cathedral?
I what I did learn, I what I learned from the articles and from my friend, because my friend who suggested it is from Germany and he actively went to the Cologne Cathedral when he was younger. Um, I learned that it took a lot of time. It took so much time because it started construction in 1248 and finished in 1880, which is at least 632 years. So it went through multiple other builders to like get it fully completed and visual like finalized. And so when I thought about it, I thought it took a lot of patience, a lot of time, and a lot of persistence to get it fully done.
Right. So it took well over 600 years to get the whole thing finished. That's really cool. One of the things that I really enjoy about this kind of a thing is that you are a Minecraft aficionado, and I love the fact that you're kind of translating this historical edifice into a contemporary rendering language. You know, if you lived 300 years ago, this would have been an oil painting rather than Minecraft design. But I think it turned out really well. So very cool. And this is the kind of creativity that I really enjoy seeing in these projects when people find stuff. So next week, we're going to look at several more projects, and I'm hoping that more people show up. It'll be next Thursday that we do this, and please bring your questions, and we will talk about everything we need to so that you guys can get what you need done and get what you need turned in accomplished. So Jacob, do you have any last questions for me?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, great. Well, today that's it for today. I know it's a little bit short. I am losing my voice, so and I don't want to sneeze all over the camera. I think that'd be really disgusting. Well, we will tie that up for today, and I'm hoping everybody watches this uh, and gets information from it as soon as possible. So, because I don't want anybody to panic. There's absolutely no reason to panic. We have plenty of time to get stuff done. So please let me know if anybody needs any help. And remember, I have my cell phone number on the syllabus in the syllabus. So if you need to contact me and email's not working, text me. And when you text me, remind me of your name and which class you're in. All right. So thank you, Jacob. Now you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Everybody have a terrific Thanksgiving. One of my favorite holidays. Abraham Lincoln instituted it at a suggestion of a woman who is a mother of one of the soldiers the um, in the war, the Civil War, and and he said when he instituted Thanksgiving, or when he asked Congress to ratify it, he said, you know, at times of hardship is when we need to be filled with gratitude more than more than any other time. And I really enjoy that perspective. So I hope people enjoy this. use your big vocabulary to defend yourself as an artist, and try really hard to get along with family. Don't talk about religion. Don't talk about politics if you can avoid it. All right. Thank you, guys. We will see you next week.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too.